The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, How to Plug the Data Gap in DevOps, sponsored by Delphix and Datical. We have a great webinar on tap today with lots of really cool, important stuff and some great speakers. But before we get started, I would like to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we do have this webinar recorded today, so will be available on demand in about 24 hours on the DevOps.com website. Also, we are going to be taking questions from the audience during today's webinar, which we'll actually go through at the end of the webinar. So if you have a question at any time, please feel free to submit your question right there using the control panel, and we'll get to your, hopefully we'll be able to get to your questions at the end, and I'm sure our panelists will be more than happy to follow up post-event if we don't get to your question during the actual webinar. Okay, let's go ahead and move right along with the slides here. We have three great panelists today, as I mentioned, and they're going to be going over how to plug that data gap. The first is Adam Bowen, who's Strategic Advisor with the Office of the CTO at Delphix. We also have Robert Reeves, or that's with a long E, Robert Reeves, who's co-founder and CTO at Datical. And then we also have Jamie Pope, who's the former Vice President of Global 10 Bank, but today he's a Senior Solution Engineer at Delphix. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dan.
Glad to be here.
Great. Great. Well, I'm not sure which one of you is going to be kicking this off, but I'm going to go ahead and just hand the mic over to you and let you go to it.
Great. Thanks. So no matter what industries we're in today, whether it's banking or retail, finance, the fact is that we all are a part of a software-driven economy. We might have been dragged kicking and screaming into the software economy, but we certainly are here. And because of that, we're all striving kind of along four main areas. We want to get better, faster, cheaper, and obviously more secure on a day-to-day basis. And the old patterns of releasing twice a year or perhaps once a quarter, those are no longer acceptable. So we're trying to drive those monolithic releases down to monthly. And of course, the people who already do monthly are looking to get weekly and even down to daily. And of course, we're aware of the unicorns that release thousands of times a day. This is all just an effort to satisfy our customers and stay ahead of the competition. And on the next slide, we can see that we've spent a lot of money as industries trying to embrace Agile and DevOps together. Yet a Forbes did a report and shows 84% of those projects fail at digital transformation. And you can point to several kind of normal indicators, but the fact is a lot of them fail because data is heavy. And because data is heavy, we kind of look at this effect as gravity. And gravity, in its most simple terms, is what keeps us down. It keeps us from jumping higher or running faster, and even to the point where it literally makes it hard for us to get out of bed in the morning sometimes. Well, data has the same effect on your programs and applications, making them, obviously more expensive. They don't move as fast. There's more risk in it. And it's just overall just a cumbersome process. And this really goes across the multiple aspects of our software development lifecycle. So whether it's application projects released slower because we're developing against data, 5 petabytes of data versus 5 megs of data. Our analytics obviously are slower. Batch windows are only getting smaller, but batch jobs are getting larger. Our cloud projects move at the speed of cold molasses rather than moving faster, because we always move data last because it's the most riskiest and the heaviest thing that we have. And then, of course, all of this compliance touches each one of these components, and it is a lot harder to secure data that is hundreds of times the size of small fake data sets. But, of course, then we inject a lot of data quality issues. Ultimately, we're trying to collect more and more data every day, and that's accumulating tons of mass. and it's doing nothing but slowing us down. And that's because of the way we do legacy data delivery. Could we advance the extra slide?
Oh, I think, well, we're going to do that poll question, right?
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
All right. Well, we have, this is the first of 5 poll questions that we'll have during the webinar. I neglected to mention that earlier, and I apologize. Yeah, we'll go ahead and push the first polling question out. We're hoping that you guys can please launch. Well, whoop, there it is. Okay, there it's, whoop. Did it launch out? There we go. Okay, so how large is the data in your production estate today? If you could go ahead and, actually it looks like the poll closed. I'm not sure what happened there. Let's see.
Big. I think the answer's big.
Yeah, the answer is big. I'm sorry what happened. We had some technical difficulty with that one. I'm sorry about that, but I'll let you guys go on ahead.
All right, cool. There you go, Adam.
All right, great, thanks. Yeah, so it's always fun working live. So, but ultimately, I think as we concluded there, data's big, data's heavy, and that's because of the way we look at handling data in the legacy style manner. So obviously, for every production application we have multiple non-production copies, and that always requires an army of people, or we call it a bucket brigade of people, handing off tasks one to another. But we have these large production applications, and when you require a refresh or a new data copy or pristine test data, it's just a long, arduous process that goes along with that. That really is a complete slowdown of time for your people, a consumption of a lot of storage and resources, and of course then it involves security. So we have really started expanding our risk portfolio across these pieces. So ultimately this just all compounds together and creates this effect that makes data hard to work with and kind of the bane of our existence. And ultimately we have to think about data in a new fashion.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. I mean, look, it's about continuous delivery, and we're doing that on the application side of the house. I mean, we've got lots of really cool stuff to help us automate those, from code to binaries getting out the door. And we're doing it for all the right reasons. We want to retain our customers, want to grow the number of customers that we have, and they want to interact with our business with the mobile phone, and that means delivering an app. Facebook is setting the pace for these large corporations. Every 2 weeks, your Facebook app is going to get updated on your mobile device, and that's what consumers expect. If we are not aligning our software deliveries with that, we look bad. And we've got that happening on the application side of the house, but for our data folks, our database professionals, man, it really stinks. Adam, you were talking about just dealing with the huge, large amount of data and moving it around for development. But those updates to that structure that contains the data is manual. You gotta, right now people are just executing SQL scripts against this stuff. It's resource intensive. It's just consuming a huge amount of time and effort, and it's risky. Like you were talking about moving this stuff around, but we've seen in recent past that when people make manual changes to stuff breaks. I mean, that was that S3 outage that happened a couple months ago. Somebody made a manual change. I know it's not a database, but I think that's very, demonstrative of what happens when humans get involved in this stuff. And we wind up getting this, what we call over at Datical, this deployment gap. Look, we're moving super fast with app releases, but the database deployments, those changes that need to happen alongside the application deployment just aren't keeping pace. So we've got, this concept of data gravity is just slowing us down. And it can't keep pace, and we just need something better. We need something that's going to allow us to keep up. So we got one more poll question. or another one.
Yes.
We got quite a few more.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully we'll be able to get this one out without any problem. Okay, here is the poll, guys. The question is your team still manually reviewing and validating database change scripts before each application release? So you can select yes, no, or I don't know. So we'll give you guys a couple seconds here to submit your answers, and then we'll go ahead and push out the results. We will also be tweeting the results of these polls post-webinar, so if you are socializing out there, feel free to forward them along. Okay, we'll give you 2 more seconds and then we are closing the poll. Okay, the results are, there we go. Okay, so we got the majority of folks are still doing manual reviews and validating database change scripts. So what do you guys think about those results? Is it indicative of what you guys are seeing out there?
Absolutely. I mean, there's really no other way, to fix that. I mean, if you're just looking at this problem, you've got a choice of cramming SQL scripts into some kind of automation framework, or executing them manually. I mean, those are your 2 choices. And as one of our customers said, automating their SQL script execution was like putting their problems on roller skates. It just made them happen faster. There needs to be a better way. If we've got automation, whether it's provisioning our environments or changing those the structure of the database, we need to use it to get faster. There's no other option for us. I mean, I think that really dovetails nicely with this some findings that we found. We went out and talked to some administrators, database administrators, dev managers, that kind of stuff. And we found this really scary thing on the left side, and that dev managers, 90% of them said that database change process does delay releases, all right, the current process, and 91% of DBAs said the same thing. The scary thing is the agreement. When your dev managers and your DBAs are in lockstep to this level, as a CIO, you need to pay attention, all right? Because let's be honest, I mean, Jamie, I'm sure in your experience, dev and DBAs, they really didn't see eye to eye, did they?
No, they didn't.
One gets paid to change, and the other gets paid for stability, and change is the enemy of stability. And that causes a lot of friction. They said it was slowing releases. 75% of DBAs reported that. But the 2 scary parts, really scary about that outside of that agreement, was the errors are increasing. All right, that manual review, because the number of changes is going up, that means that they're spending less time on that manual review. That's leading to increased errors. That's not good. And then finally, they said, look, we need automation, and the stuff that we have today is not working. And so I think Adam's going to kind of lay out exactly, like from a tech perspective, why the database is the bottleneck.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robert. So, I mean, that's exactly the findings we see out there, right? So if we would look at all these movements today, especially around the DevOps movement, database has been left out for all the reasons we said earlier, right? It's just assumed data is hard, so we leave it off to the side, and we can provision infrastructure in minutes, but we don't touch the data because just data's heavy. It's hard. It's just an accepted fact, right? Nothing's going to change about that. At least that's the assumption. And so because of that, if we follow the theory of constraints, we see that the common constraint in these environments is database is the bottleneck. And that's kind of the thing we talked about earlier. So obviously we have a great production application, and for that we need all these non-production copies, but the traditional way of handling it is obviously it's slow. We talk about collecting all these many touch points. It's not under version control. Both your data's not under version control. The changes to your database objects and such aren't under version control, which means it's not repeatable. It's certainly not consistent. And even from that perspective, it becomes very sensitive, and security prone to security exploits because what happens? Because data is not available earlier in part of your screen, security is an afterthought or at the end, and so that's when we get, and security can only do its review at the end. They have a tight timeline, and of course, it really just exposes the problem of RASC. Ultimately, this means we just introduce a lot of risk into our applications, and they really take a lot longer time to develop and cost a lot more money to do that.
Hey, what do you know? We got another poll question. Okay, we've got, this is poll number, well, it's officially number 3, although we did have the mess up with the first one, but we may actually have that one reloaded for later on if you guys want to do that. But here's the next polling question, which is, are database change deployments slowing down your application release process? Yes, no, or I don't know. I'll give you guys a couple seconds. Also want to remind the audience, if you have a question for any of our speakers today about anything that they're discussing, please feel free to go ahead and put your question in via the control panel, and we'll get to those near the end of the webinar. Okay, we've got about 5 more seconds before we close the poll, and we'll go ahead and close it now. And here are the results. We got the majority of folks, looks like 60% of you say that database change deployments are slowing down the application release process. So clearly, guys, some work needs to be done.
Adam, we should fix this problem. What do you say, buddy?
Good. Yeah, good idea. Let's give it a go, shall we? Yeah, so from a Delphic, so this is consistent what we see across the board, and I would dare to say, Robert, that those that registered I don't know, they fall into the yes category. They just don't realize the impact it's having in their environments. And you know, kind of from that whole perception, Jamie, from your kind of experience in that area. I mean, what was the database change process? How impactful was that actually to impacting your release cadence or just even the quality of your releases?
It was huge. DBAs are overwhelmed. You know, they have other work to do. But when you have an application with, say, 6 development pipelines and 10 to 20 SQL scripts that have to be deployed at every single one of those inserts, it causes massive slowdowns. Not just executing a SQL script, but then validating that the schema change has been made and that it is valid. There's back and forth between those two. So it caused a big impact on our delivery.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately what we see across the majority of our customers too, and that at Delphic we're striving to help you treat data as code, and that's one part of the equation. And we want you to be able to treat data like infrastructure, mutable infrastructure, be able to provision data in seconds and get it where you want to in minutes, destroy it, rewind it, get it back to the pristine environment, just like you can with infrastructure and code. And the way we do that, I'll kind of briefly cover that with Delphic just at a high level, but today in traditional data management, we've already talked about it. You make copies, you physically back up that infrastructure or back up that data, move it over, make multiple copies of it. And in that case, you have, obviously, if we have a 20 terabyte source, we have 60 terabytes represented on this screen. And that's slow and cumbersome. And on the next slide, though, we're going to show.
Oh, Adam, we got one more. We got a poll here.
Okay.
It's almost like you're being thwarted by these polling questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay, here's our next polling question, folks. How often do you refresh your non-production environments today? You can select one of the following: every 2 weeks, monthly, at least once every 6 months, ad hoc requests, or never. And I hope nobody selects never.
Yeah, Adam.
All right, we'll give you guys.
Oh, Adam, back in the day, this was my job when I was working in the late 90s for a .com in Austin. I would have to drive to the data center, copy the production data over to a hard drive, and physically pull it out and drive it back to the office for the test environments because we didn't have a large enough pipe to get it. That was a big deal, man. That was just
Yep.
huge. And it
That's
was once
they're you know the famous quip of never underestimate the bandwidth of a station wagon full of tapes curling down the highway comes from literal experience of having actually done that, and so it really speaks volumes. And honestly, I think you talk about doing that in the 90s, but one of my more recent customers literally was still doing that as of 2 years ago, doing that and walking a backup across the street because that was faster than transferring it across the network.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's so crazy that it hasn't changed, man. It hasn't changed since the 90s.
Well, here are their poll results. It looks like the majority of folks are still doing ad hoc requests. And we do have 3% who have never refreshed their non-production environments. So, yikes.
I will say a silent prayer for them this evening.
Yeah, I'm pouring out one for my homies right now.
Yeah. Good call. So from a Delphix perspective, like Robert said, let's fix it, right? So it doesn't have to be that way anymore. And for our customers, it's not that way anymore. And we'll briefly cover how Delphix addresses that. Ultimately, Delphix is a virtual machine that lives in your environment or runs in Amazon or runs in Azure, wherever your data is. And it connects to your data sources and collects that data into the Delphix virtual machine. There's some storage savings there, but ultimately that's not what it's all about. And then number two, we're actually, once we connect to that data source, which by the way, we're just using native APIs. So if it's Oracle, we're connecting via RMAN or what have you for your other data sources. But once we connect and get that initial copy, we're also staying in near real-time sync with that production application, which means for the first time ever, you actually have your production data under version control, down to the second and down to the transaction, even across multiple sources. We can keep them all in sync and treat that data as version control. And then kind of the third point on this is once we have that data under version control, so what? So what do we do with it? So with Delphix, we're able to spin up many autonomous copies of that data and share the blocks, which means we don't duplicate storage, and that data is near instantly available in those environments to do destructive testing, development, etc. And to the fourth point, what's that? There we go. And then to the fourth point, all those virtual environments that Delphix has provisioned in minutes, by the way, Delphix is capturing all the changes to that, so all those non-production environments are also under version control. So if I do a destructive test and I want to rewind the test to run the test again with Delphix, since the data is in version control, it just takes it back in a few minutes. This can all be done via powerful self-service tools with one click of a button and a web browser, or it can all be done via Jenkins, like a lot of my customers do. And ultimately on this kind of the unhidden or the unspoken point 5 on the last slide, but you don't have to go back, Robert, is that all these non-virtual, that's no problem, all these virtual copies as well that are there can be secured. So Delphix has an integrated masking solution, so we can make sure that developers and testers never have access to sensitive data, but they have realistic mass data with referential integrity. It's really quite a powerful thing. But ultimately, what does this mean? Is that this bucket brigade, this bottleneck of handoffs and ticket requests and processes and human intervention to delivering massive amounts of data that need to be orchestrated, all that goes away, the constraint goes away, and in minutes you can have 71 terabyte copies of your production data up, or 170 terabyte copy, whatever, but it's all delivered via self-service, which ultimately boils down to, or means that your developers and testers and analysts can actually get to work faster because the data is just available on demand and they can do it without having to get a lot of people in the way. And that's right, is from a data perspective. Yeah, no problem. And I think, Robert, though, that we talk about, right, if that's the chocolate, right, that there's a peanut butter aspect to this too.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, you're provisioning this data for development and test for a reason. This isn't for fun. You've got work to do. And part of that work is you need to update that schema. You need to update that stored logic, those stored procedures to align with your application changes. And too often we've got this back and forth between dev, QA, and DBAs on what change needs to go where. And we automate that with Datical, all right? We're, just like Delphix, we're going to integrate with your existing tools and processes. You've got something in place already to get your code out the door. All right, you are maybe using Jenkins to check out code and compile it, and then you move it along that pipeline out to production. What we want to do, Delphix and Datical, is we want to align with that release process. It's already working for you. You are just missing the data part of it. And so we're going to align with that. We're going to integrate with those tools out of the box. And when you have that automated deployment with Datical, that going from left to right, what you're able to do is you're able to validate database changes. The reason why you needed a DBA to look at these things in the past is because you wanted the world's most, the fastest, best computer to review these SQL scripts. But we've got functionality in Datical that can peer into those changes and decide if they are going to meet your standards. Things like don't add a foreign key unless all the columns in that have an index applied, or don't add too many columns to an index or too many indexes to a table. All those things that your DBAs are looking for, we can automate that kind of stuff so that you can focus on the other things that are more important to you, those more strategic tasks that we want our DBAs to focus on. And I think we've got another poll question here.
Yes, this is our last polling question, unless we're able to redo the first one. But here's the question for this one. Is your organization automated, it should be, has your organization automated its database deployment process? We've got yes, no, but we plan to introduce this, no, and we do not plan to introduce this, or I don't know. So we'll give the audience another 10 seconds or so to go ahead and put their, to answer the polling question. And then also, guys, just want to remind you again, if you have a question for any of our panelists, we do encourage you to go ahead and get your question in at any time. We already have a couple really decent questions in, so I'm really looking forward to the Q&A part of this. Okay, we'll go ahead and close.
Well, I was just going to say, while we were waiting on the poll, I think this might be a good point at Jamie. Jamie, from your experience in that case, I mean, obviously, you know, getting the data there, that's part of the problem. But like being able to incorporate and kind of codify those database changes, like Robert was talking about. I mean, how impactful was that to you in your experience?
Well, again, it was another huge move, and Robert touched on it earlier, and he's probably heard me regurgitate this many times, but the applications here had moved along. You know, the application code was being pushed and deployed, and people didn't have to show up to do it. And what that built in that space was consistency, and it was consistent. And on our tier, and it wasn't anyone's fault, but it's just the way that it was. There wasn't a consistent process across business units for how to push DDL, right? Let alone just internally to mine. Different business units had different needs. They used different tools, different people. But it really slowed down and caused this inconsistent state. Databases weren't in a consistent state. Testing took longer because you had to get a database in the same spec that you needed it to for your test. And it really caused some grief between, you know, your business partners and your DBA teams. So it was huge when we were able to stick that code into a source repository and allow some automation to go look at it and apply it consistently on every schema the same way every time. It really, your surface level risk was much smaller because there was a lot of hands in the pie.
All right, let's go ahead and share the results of the poll. Has your organization automated its database deployment process? Looks like 53% said no, but they plan to introduce it. So that's encouraging.
Great news.
Definitely. So,
yeah, that is.
Exactly.
That's how you get to those Little League games on time.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. Yep, so important. So important.
So let's talk about how we're doing this, how we're automating those database deployments. At Datical, what we have is a database code packager. What we're able to do is we're able to look at your SQL scripts and bring them into a Datical release. That allows your team to continue using the tools that they are using today. If they like using Irwin, forward engineering to throw out some Delta scripts, Delta DDL, no problem. Keep doing it. Toad, SQL Developer, we don't care. VI Emacs, okay, sure. Good luck. But
don't hate, Robert. Don't hate.
No, it's all right. I mean, it's you know. Oh, as an aside, did you see that #1 Stack Overflow response?
Yeah.
Question: how do I get out of VI?
Yep, I did. It's awesome.
But use whatever you want to get that SQL into your source code repository. And then Datical is able to slurp that up and create a release package, all right? Once that's done, you could do quite a few things with it. One is we can apply our dynamic rules engine to it, enforcing those standards to those proposed changes. We've got this simulator, kind of a forecast, show you what we're going to change but don't really change it. Super valuable, especially if you've got a multi-scrum release rolling up into one big monolithic release. You can see all these changes holistically together. And then finally, with the deployment monitoring console, it allows you to just monitor the status of every database deployment across the enterprise, and you can tie that into your existing monitoring solution or dashboarding app to see it all. And what you get with a combination of the two. Adam, do you want to talk about this slide, and then I'll get into those two use cases?
Yeah, sure, great. So ultimately, what you get with combining these two is that you get your data under code, or you get your data under version control, and also those changes along to your data under version control, which means this now you can eliminate the what we call the app data code mismatch, where your application code comes along and it branches and it forks or what have you, and there's significant changes there, but the data doesn't match, and you either hoard it or you hand jam it, etc. But it brings a lot of inconsistencies. So by combining Delphix and Datical together, we can also make sure that we're always leveraging fresh data and applying those changes together in an automated fashion. And what ultimately happens is we look in DevOps, there's a concept around shift left, and today it kind of means really trying to bring quality earlier into the cycle, into like unit testing. But when you combine Delphix and Datical, you can actually extend this all the way into the dev cycle to where you're actually building production every time you even do a rebase on your feature branches or what have you in those environments. So which means that you have higher consistency, things get moved faster, and you actually find possible errors or conflicts in your code much, much earlier, making you faster and more efficient, as Jamie said earlier, even reducing your service area of risk together because it's one controlled and automated process, part of your pipeline.
Yeah, it's bringing all the goodies that we've got over on the dev side of the house over to the database side of the house. All those lessons learned, those hard-fought battles about agile software development and DevOps, those sorts of things, that's what we're bringing here. I mean, we know this virtuous cycle, code, build, release, over in the dev side of the house. And then, of course, we've got production all the way on the far right. And Delphix is able to provision that virtual database, mask that data so that if we have sensitive data that we do not want to share, customer specific data, we can mask that with Delphix and make certain that we are providing an environment for our dev team and all points in between, and get it out to them quickly, safely, self-service. I mean, how cool is that? Where Datical fits into this idea is that those database changes, all right, where you say add a column, rewrite this stored procedure, those sorts of things, are then pushed to those virtual databases the same way you would to a database on a physical instance or in the cloud or something like that. What this allows you to do is you're shifting left to find these issues far earlier. All right, you are developing against a production version of the schema, of the database. You are testing against a virtual database that is a copy of production. So you know that when you push this change out, when you do your development, it is going to be far more likely to be successful. You're decreasing costs, you're increasing time to market because you're just faster, and you don't have to have a bunch of people running around like 6-year-olds at the soccer game, you know, scrum around the ball. This also provides insight to your DBA team, provides them insight into changes. All right, they actually get to know what's about to happen, as opposed to that 11th hour, oh, hey, get on this bridge call at 3 a.m. and look at the SQL script. Jamie, that never happened, right?
No, that was that never occurred.
Surprise! Get on this call. So we got another use case here, and I'm going to kind of drill into this, and then we're going to kind of talk about these things together. All right, just have a little discussion. But you know, you've got this release. We'll call it 2.4 popping out of development. All right. This has got everything. This has got your application. This has got your database changes. It's got everything. And we're about to send this to test. So what we've done is with Delphix, we've provisioned an ephemeral test environment. It's not real. All right. I didn't have to go out and buy a server. I didn't have to go and you know, get a help desk ticket or anything like that. I just said, click, give it to me. And it showed up. And it is an exact copy of what we have from production, and that's super cool. What Datacle is able to do is when you do that release, you know, the easy part is getting the app out there. You know, just copy that WAR file, EAR file over, whatever, blow it away, you know, maybe restart the server, and we're done. But for the database, we need to actually evolve that schema, and that's what we do. So two things are happening here. One is Delphix is providing an environment that is identical to production. And that gives you a far higher level of confidence in your testing. Your test integrity is far higher. And then you're also testing your push mechanism with Datacle so that when you do go to push it to production, you ain't got no problem. You by definition have already tested this. So you've tested your app against production data provided by Delphix, and you've tested your deployment mechanism with Datacle. So when you do make that push to production, it's a no-brainer. It's your level of confidence is far higher. And I'm not going to read through these 3 bullet points because I just spoke to them. But on this next slide, we've got, you know, I don't think we were going to, you know, list through this, you know, Adam and Jamie, but,
Yeah.
you know, there's been some, you know, we've got mutual customers that are using Datacle and Delphix, and
Yep.
they're doing some really cool stuff. One of them is an investment company, and what they've been able to do is use Delphix to provision those virtual databases, and they actually create a copy of production. This is their quote-unquote staging environment, all right? It has all the production apps, all the production databases, all right? And then they do an upgrade to a handful of the apps, because all the apps talk to each other. It's kind of like a macro microservices architecture, you know, these big monolithic apps that actually talk to each other. And then they test the push. They test the application update and then the database push. And because Delphix is providing the virtual databases as mirror of production, and they're also testing the upgrade with Datacle, they can finally create ephemeral production environments and see what's going to happen. You know, it's kind of like that old saying, like, well, not old saying, but that joke, I don't always test my code, but when I do it in production. That's
right.
what they're able to do, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have seen that in other places. You've seen that kind of combination, and that benefits in other places as well, right?
Actually, it's funny, you know, mention that kind of apropos is that, like, I'm in Singapore today, as we talked about, so coming to you live from the other side of the world, quite literally. And, you know, I was with a global bank this morning, and we were talking about Delphix and how they're doing, and I didn't realize this, but they said, oh yeah, and they said, oh yeah, and we're using Datacle to deploy the changes to the data. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, well, it's funny. If you have nothing to do around midnight, we will be talking about this. And I was told, well, I'll be in the pub, so you can come join me, but I'm not coming to join you. But you know, to him, I just kind of laughed because it was apropos. But he looked at me and said, like, it wouldn't make sense not to. He's like, they go hand in hand. If I'm no longer constrained by delivering data to places, now I can actually treat data as code. So I've got to do that. So being able to get that chocolate and peanut butter combination together, to him, it just makes sense. I have chocolate, I have peanut butter. Let's make this deliciousness happen and bring them together. And that's from my customer. Jamie, maybe from that perspective, you can shed some light from your personal perspective on that, your personal experience of having done this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the automation piece and the stability of having a consistent process, again, for me, what was the key to our success, right? It wasn't no more scripts floating around in people's inboxes or in a work request system, or the one that was deployed to Kit had been edited, so there's something new that was sent in the work request that was going to go to Sit, and then there's a mismatch. Having this consistent process where we can push database refresh and code changes automatically along with our code really changed the game for my platform and for my business partners. Things that used to happen in a performance test environment where we would spend literally days and even weeks trying to figure out an issue or get the environment in a state where it was production-like was gone. My business partners told me, thanks to you, we were spending hours in our perf environment to get it ready instead of days and literally weeks of triage calls with execs and everyone on the line.
Yeah, look, there's, man, there is so much cool stuff you get to do when you automate this stuff. There's so much, I mean, okay, yeah, you get to finally catch up to the application folks, and that's really neat. But you get to do so many other things, and frankly, it is. I think it's a crime that we're doing this to our DBAs, that we're forcing them to work harder, faster, do more of the same. We need these folks that have decades of experience with these database platforms to work on other things, to help us move to the cloud, to help us, to shard off those parts of the database to move to microservices architecture. We need their help on those things, not, provisioning copies of production or executing SQL scripts. We need to help them out.
Robert, I was going to say to that point, right? When I talk to our customers, especially just even today, this bank we were talking to, is those types of tasks, that's equivalent, that's changing data diapers, right? So that's doing the stuff that you just have to do it. But ultimately, like, we envision ourselves when we're parents, we don't envision it's not the glory isn't changing the diapers, but it's, teaching our kids to walk and helping them through life's problems, watching them speak their first word, all these major achievements. And I think our DBAs are the same way. The reason that they're still doing it is because they love what they're doing. They have a passion for it, and they want to see, their applications and their companies succeed. But they've always just kind of been forced to change the data diapers. And this allows them to get away from that and get to those high-value tasks that they want to do: query tuning, performance, security, patching, upgrades, those types of things.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that, because Puppet put out there every year. They put that state of DevOps.
State of DevOps report. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the 2015 one that they did that really struck me, because they found that companies that adopt DevOps, and that's really what we're talking about here, bringing DevOps to the database.
Sure. Right. Yep.
Companies that adopt that actually have a higher market capitalization. All right, so they're worth more, and they outperform the S&P 500. And okay, that's great. Right. DevOps makes your company more valuable. What I took away from that was that the geeks are now increasing the value of the company. We used to think that it was always an exercise
right.
of sales and marketing and all that other silliness. But no. The folks on the keyboard, rocking VI, can make a difference to the value of that company. And that is shocking. Certainly, that it's, wow, we can just do this thing here, and we actually increase the value of the company because we're able to move faster. We're able to do really cool things. We're able to get to market faster, and we're going to kick the crap out of our competitors by adopting this. And you're right, man. It's just let's move past this. Let's quit doing this low order stuff and go tackle the hard problems.
When we do that, Robert, we're able to create high trust cultures, which was a key pinnacle of that report. High trust cultures, we're empowering everybody that's involved to actually be key impact players. And ultimately, as part of that, we actually start looking at everybody that's touching keyboards, as you put it, as part of a value stream. And their mission is to deliver value to our customers. And that's what we want everybody focused on. And that's what makes all of us happy at the end of the day.
Oh, for sure, man, for sure. Well, look, we got 15 left, so I'm going to park it on the Q&A slide here.
Yeah, great. So we've gotten a really large number of questions, so why don't we go ahead and just dive right on in. The first question is from Paul, who asks, does data size matter?
Awesome. So maybe I'll take that one, right?
Please.
So if you have data flops of data, then then maybe I'll tread with trepidation. But we have customers today that are virtualizing huge multi-terabyte databases. One of my customers recently was bragged to at an awards ceremony where he won an award for his Delphix implementation, that they're provisioning 80 terabyte Microsoft SQL databases and up and ready in less than 10 minutes with Delphix. They have multiple copies. Their developers can refresh them. And again, it's one click of a button and 10 minutes. So we have some really large data sources out there connected to Delphix today. And I don't know.
Did I lose you guys?
Datacle doesn't have it. No?
Yeah, for Datacle, absolutely, data size does not matter because we're dealing with the structure, the schema. We're doing DDL. I mean, we'll push out some DML too, as part of that release process. But for us, it's whether it's a little tiny database or your production database, it's the same for us.
Okay.
Immaterial.
Excellent. Okay, great. Sorry, my audio cut out for a second, so I thought maybe I lost you all. So sorry about that. Okay, well,
no problem.
Okay, so the next question then is from Volker, who says, please go into the difference between code quality of database specs and scripts to handle them.
Can you repeat it one more time? Make sure I got it right.
Sure. He's wondering if you can kind of discuss the difference between code quality of database specs and scripts to handle them.
Database. So I'm going to assume we're talking about code quality of things like the DDL, like things that would update the structure, and then the code quality of stored procedures and those sorts of things. If I get it wrong, then please answer in the chat window. But there's a lot of great tools out there for static code analysis for SQL. All right, Toad is really good at it. You can also use SonarQube for that stuff, and that's really cool. Please integrate that with your build system, all right? Where Datacle comes in to enforce that code quality on the structure is that we look ahead at the database and we evaluate that change in context. So we won't allow you to do chuckle-headed stuff like, varchar2 5000. Okay, we're not going to let you do that, all right, because we're going to have a rule that enforces data type sanity, and you can customize these rules. Anything that you can change with Datacle, which is everything, you can write a rule to either allow it or disallow it or fine-tune it, those sorts of things. So it's not only we go into the things like enforcing naming conventions and enforcing your change in context of the database it's hitting. That's where we come into code quality.
Okay.
So we have
I see. So I see. So another question coming in is how difficult is, well, I'll summarize it. How difficult is something like Datacle and Delphix to implement? So I will, I guess I'll handle from the Delphix perspective, and that's ultimately, so Delphix, inside of a week, our customers are already virtualizing databases and beginning to see value. Sometimes the deployment of Delphix might go on for a couple months as they roll it across the enterprise, but it's not something like an Oracle product where you'll go months and months and months before you ever see the first drip. Inside of the first week of a Delphix deployment, your developers are already hands-on with their data and leveraging, you're already masking data, so you're already getting value out of it right away. And Robert, over to you on the Datacle side.
It's the same. Look, we're bringing DevOps to the database where it is going to be a change in process, and we can do that the same thing in a week as well. We've seen faster implementations. We've seen implementations that take longer because they're larger. And I'd really like to, ask Jamie. Jamie, you implemented, Datacle over at your former employer. How long did that take you?
I was the antithesis of what we like at Delphix. I tried to boil the ocean immediately. In other words, my entire footprint, I gave a mandate to my team that we would be onboarded with Datacle by a date, and that date was 90 days. And within 90 days, I had 60 applications and about 15,000 schema, all instrumented and talking through a code repository where we kept our Datacle artifacts. So it could have been faster had I not tried to boil the ocean and stuck to 1 or 2 apps right away, but very fast, very fast.
All right, cool.
The bigger piece, and you've heard us speak about it, is culturally and your process. And that's the beauty of not having to ask your business partners to go invest in another IDE or use a different tool. They can continue, as Robert said, to use what they use. Delphix and Datacle, we don't care if you're using Toad or SQL Developer. Continue to do that, or how you create your code. So that really speeds up your implementation time because you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to learn something new.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, great. Well, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next question. Is from Malind, who's asking, he says, we version control SQL scripts and use open source tool Flyaway to perform automated DB deployments. But we still find ourselves in a situation where the process of DB deployment is not exactly in lockstep with the application deployment. Are there any recommendations in terms of tools or processes that we can look at?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, Datacle. I mean, look, Flyway it's an open source tool that allows you to execute SQL. You put that into your build system, into Jenkins, you put it into any kind of application release automation framework. It's, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, it's going to put your problems on roller skates. Look, if you want to automate this stuff, you need to take those things that scare you, all right, the loss of data, the breaking things of executing these SQL scripts, and you need to, put it on guardrails, and that's what Datacle does. Look, it is open source solutions. We're a big fan, but sometimes when we're dealing with a large amount of data, we need something that's a little bit bigger than that, something that has a little bit richer feature set. And with our ability to simulate changes and certainly enforce rules and standards, we've seen companies that just hit a button and automatically deploy their app and automatically deploy their database with one push. So I would recommend just looking at our stuff. All
right then. Good enough. Okay, so the next question is from Arena, who asks, does Delphix have an appliance for SQL Server and MongoDBs? And also, does the VDB creation go through a GUI only, or can it be done via an API so it can be wrapped to a command script? And then finally, does Delphix works only in Linux, or can it be installed on Windows?
Awesome. Wow, that's
a huge question.
I love that. Fantastic. That is a huge question. That's like a politician's question. So perfect. So great. The great news is that it's a simple answer. So Delphix can actually, it can virtualize many data sources, right? So it can virtualize Microsoft SQL, Oracle, Sybase, DB2, even unstructured data. And we have customers leveraging the unstructured data portion today for Mongo, but we have Mongo support coming in the near future, at least planning at looking at doing that. So from that perspective, we have support for many platforms, and including applications like eBusiness Suite, PeopleSoft, and all that stuff. And of course, we can mask those things as well. From a platform support, Delphix itself is a virtual machine, so you don't actually have to install any software. You just put the virtual machine in your VMware or Amazon or Azure environment and turn it on. You just give it some storage and turn it on. So great news is you don't actually have to install and configure software to run on operating systems. And Delphix is all web page driven from a user interface perspective, which means, guess what? Whatever you operate on today, you don't have to install clients or agents. So you don't have to worry about I'm on a Windows box or I'm on a Linux box to do that. And then finally, last question is, Delphix's own GUI leverages everything you do in our web interface, actually calls our REST APIs. Delphix is built from the ground up to be automated and via self-service. So that means everything you do via the web interface can also be called via Jenkins and or Bamboo or Puppet or Chef, whatever you happen to use in your environment, even TFS if you're a Microsoft shop, since you brought up Microsoft. And we have a CLI interface, et cetera. So we're really big on automation and self-service. So I think I covered up all those in quick order because I was hoping to save time for a couple other questions.
I think you did answer the questions. Congratulations. That was pretty awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, our next question is from Howie, who asks, what is your support for SAP?
Awesome. Wow. So Delphix, our huge, we have SAP, some SAP's biggest customers are Delphix customers. So SAP is a strong use case for Delphix. There's a lot of white paper. I couldn't really go into that in all the minutes. I'll expound the benefits, but ultimately, when you're doing SAP testing and stuff, you might apply 200 transports, and if a transport fails, then you have to kind of do all this ad hoc changes and stuff. With Delphix, we allow you to roll back to the last successful transport, fix it, try it again, roll back, fix it, and all this happens in minutes. We allow one of our customers to do zero downtime refreshes with SAP. And if you're an SAP people on the line, I probably just blew your mind. So go to Delphix and you can find out more information about how we enable things like zero downtime refresh with SAP environments.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to let Peter talk about his, well, I will talk about Peter's question. He says, our production environment is built of 10 databases, 8 Microsoft SQL databases in 2012 and 2 Microsoft SQL databases in 2008. In total, it measures about 40 TG. I'm not sure what TG is, but how long would it take for Delphix to create a copy of all of these databases to create a dev or test environment?
Awesome. Honestly, if it's 40 terabytes, I already told you, we can provision an 80 terabyte one for one of our customers in under 10 minutes. The size of the data really doesn't matter to Delphix. It's really, from that perspective, it's how long it does it take Microsoft SQL or Oracle to start up or shut down. That's really the kind of the factor on all that. So I would say categorically, well under an hour, and that's honestly given me a lot of time to do that. But ultimately, we'll keep all those things in sync. I have a customer that we virtualize 400 production data sources together, and we have that stood up in under 30 minutes. And those are Sybase, but it's kind of the same. It's for Delphix, it's all the same. So we can provision a copy of 400 source databases, have those all up and running in under 30 minutes, and we're talking many, many terabytes beyond 40. So I would say probably realistically under 10 minutes, maybe even 5, but it all has to take a look at, when you get in there, but certainly really faster than what you're doing today.
Wow. Sounds great. Okay, I think that's pretty much all the time that we have for the questions. I know we didn't get to everybody's questions, but I'm sure our panelists would be more than happy to follow up with you post-event to answer any questions that you may have. Up on the screen, you'll notice that, okay, great. So up on the screen, you'll notice that there is information about a white paper filling the data gap in DevOps that the fine folks at Delphix and Datical are making available to attendees of today's webinar. So you will be receiving an email link post-webinar to download this white paper. So that's just a nifty little add-on there. But because we are running out of time, I would like to thank Robert Reeves, Adam Bowen, and Jamie Pope for being on today's webinar and providing us with some really, really awesome information. I'm sure the audience got a ton out of it. I know I did. Please check DevOps.com for future webinars. And again, thank you all for joining me today. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, the moderator for today's event, and I wish you a good day. Thank you.